Welcome. If we were to break down human behavior and activity into categories, for the sake of analyzing something related to social relationships or bird feeding. That bird was saying, see you around to me. And part of the reason it's saying that is that it knows me. We play a game. And we play a game actively. Right? Now this is a very complex problem because in a sense it's very difficult to determine the ethics of a situation where on one side of the fence, so to speak, we have one being, and on the other side of the fence, so to speak, we have another being. For example, me and the blue jay. And over here on my side, I have access to all of the creations of my species. And also a ridiculously large, if wildly incomplete, catalog of food items and so forth. So I can sort of theory of mind my way to know that these birds here live here in the city. Humans bring them various kinds of food occasionally. They are synanthropes. They are evolutionarily adapted to go together with humans. So humans don't terrify them. And most birds can learn to get food from humans, or can learn to accept food from humans. Hi! Birds are intelligent. And that is to say they are relationally sensitive. They probably understand something like the idea of being mean. Right? Or at least they're capable of such understanding in their own terms, not in human terms. So unfortunately in this case, I'm playing a game with the jays, and it's a fun game for both of us. I get to have a relationship with the jays, which is awesome. And maybe be a bit of a bridge between my people and their people, also excellently fun and great. But I can also be stupid, and I can make mistakes. In some ways, I'd be surprised if the birds didn't take the relationship vastly more seriously than I do. Though I do take it seriously. The problem is, my side of the game is giving the bird a peanut. Which, in game theoretical terms, could be thought of as a sacrifice, right? I give up a little bit of my wealth. As a first move. I give something first. Right? Instead of sitting and waiting, or throwing a rock at them, or waiting for them to poop on my head, presuming that any birds might be thusly motivated. It's funny, all the birds are acting a little bit strangely at the moment. They're all around me. Put it mildly. Well, the martins aren't. They're doing their circle flying, bird hunting, I'm a daytime bat game. I wonder if they have radar. I wonder if they do something like what the bats do and the humans just didn't discover it. It would seem that people would have tried to detect it, but in any case. The problem is, I'm bringing something that the bird knows what it is, visually recognizes it, and it's nervous system capturing. It's like, showing a person who cares about money a couple stacks of $100 bills. Right? It's very compelling, which kind of isn't fair. Right? As a first move, it's kind of not fair. The problem is that we live in a desperate situation. We live in a city. It doesn't mean that it's impossible to get the bird's attention without food, or to have a relationship with it without offering food. But offering food is a very expedient way. And also, if the bird has needs, if it has to go after things, if it's, say, foraging, right? It doesn't need physical objects, right? There's nothing I can offer the bird as a human that will be immediately meaningful to the bird. Now, in theory, I could establish a relationship with a bird by constant visiting, observation, mutual observation. But it's very difficult to make a meaningful move that the bird will clearly understand the signal of, right? And that I will clearly understand the signal of. I've been listening today to Jordan Peterson. Big round of applause. He's somebody lots of people love to hate. I don't care. I think he's rad. I learned shit from him. I learn important ideas from him every time I listen to him. Pretty much without fail. I'm going to try to remember a couple of those I picked up today because they were crazy good. So him and Sapolsky are talking about evolution and game theory. What they're really talking about, I think, isn't necessarily just evolution per se. It's, what time is it? It's relational behavior as a selection criteria They were talking about prisoner's dilemma stuff, tit for tat. And what they defined as tit for tat was a situation in which if somebody defects, that's what I'll call it. They were calling it stabbing and backstabbing, right? Somebody, betrays the trust. There's rounds, right? And one of the things they said is that in any situation where there's no reason to believe there's going to be a second round, right? A next interaction, a next iteration. The pressure goes toward backstabbing very quickly. For complex reasons, and I'm not even sure if they say what the reasons are. But this was very important, hearing this one thing, that with people who we are not sure if we will ever see each other one more time or have any further interactions, it's basically let me see if I can remember how this played out. So it turns out that rounds matter a lot, and the apparently triumphant strategy is, in game theoretical terms, right, is something like cooperate until defection, on defection, defect, right, hit back one time, and then keep hitting back till defection ceases, then cooperate. Something like this. Yeah. And there was a lot of complex discussion about research and animals and so forth. Once this principle was discovered in the lab, computationally using algorithms, they went looking for it in nature, and they found something that closely resembled it in, of all creatures, vampire bats. I learned a little bit about vampire bats. So vampire bats do forage for blood. It's very interesting. They're basically doing something very similar to what mosquitoes are doing, which is they're using the blood to feed their children. Right? They don't eat the blood. They collect the blood in a throat sac. They cooperate in this activity. And then most likely the blood undergoes some minor metabolic transformation while in the throat sac, but who knows, maybe not. And they feed that blood to their children when they return from foraging. And so they tested the bats, and they found that if they took the blood out of a female bat but put something in her throat sac to make it look engorged, like she had a lot of blood to share, because they feed each other's children, not just their own, communal feeding. And obviously, she has a bulging throat sac but isn't feeding other children because she has no blood to feed them. But the other bats don't know that, apparently. And so she gets punished for one round by the other bats not feeding her children. One round, one night, apparently. And then it goes back to cooperation again, if allowed to, by the scientists intervening. Now, One could argue that the scientists are doing something so stupid and that the other bats know that the bat has been interfered with so that they don't want to have anything to do with her. The interference might be contagious, right? They could get a big lump in their throat with no blood in it. Right? Maybe that bat's telling the other bat somehow, the aliens abducted me and they filled my throat with a bubble. Stay away, right? Because it's not good. They might get you, too. Funny. I mean, both things are at least possible. Hopefully the scientists try to control for that somehow, if they're intelligent at all, because they presume, apparently, that the bats don't communicate, which seems wildly unlikely to me, but I suppose it's possible. And I guess there's various ways you could test them to see if they're communicating, but I don't know. Once you involve the humans and their machines and measuring things and shit, the whole fucking situation transforms, it seems to me, so... yeah, I don't know. You're okay. When they just mentioned that in game theoretical terms, we would look at situations in an iterative, like where we're counting iterations, which is obviously importantly crucial. It's obvious that us moderns live in a terribly disadvantaged situation where unless we're connected with extended social groups in a meaningful way, many of the people we will encounter, and this number will grow dramatically as we age, we will only see them once, right? Or they will be people like the mailman, presuming that mailmen still exist. Probably in some strange places in the United States, there might still be milkmen, which I think are hilariously, brilliantly ridiculous. The number of jokes you can make about milkmen is vast. And I get that I live in 2024 and I'm not supposed to say postman. Tough luck, I was born in the 60s. There were no mail women. There were no post women. There were just men. And probably part of why the mailmen were men is that stuff, you've got to be willing to kind of, it comes from the people who were messengers, right? Who used to be, they'll protect the message with their life. And, back in the 60s and 70s, there were some women who could fight, but the common, found around the corner female probably wasn't a boxer and wouldn't be inclined to defend the male with her life. She's got kids at home, maybe. Right? In any case, mailmen and milkmen. By the way, I'm going to plug Deep Sea Comics, Reed Fleming, World's Toughest Milkman, as one of the most ridiculous and hilarious comic books I've ever come across. Now, where was I? Games. Okay, so language isn't only a game, but it is kind of a game. And our lives aren't merely games, but they are game-like. And in some cases, we actually play games. Now, children left to their own devices, will naturally play games. What kinds of games they choose to play together and how they invent them together, which is what they usually do, at least at first, right? You put two approximately 3-year-old, 2 or 3-year-old children in the, where do you put them? You put them in a little clearing in the woods with their moms nearby, and they'll probably play a lot. And they'll invent games together, right? They'll try simple ones first, and they'll sort of test the water. And then they'll go for games that are complex enough to test, to, as Peterson said, maximize their adaptability over time. Meaning learn, right? They will do things that help them learn. And they will go back and forth between each other. It's kind of a reunion thing, actually, because those two babies were probably one thing not very long ago. And lots of cool stuff happens. And, occasionally rivalrous dynamics emerge. Possibly. I don't know how common it is among 3-year-olds. Yeah. Babies play. And humans play too. But they're less likely to play if they're only going to meet once, because play is a risk. If you're going to play, you're vulnerable. There is a kind of safety in anonymous one-meet transactions or no transaction, right? But we play games. And some of the games we play are linguistic. And as adults, most of them have a linguistic element. So we moderns, we're badly impoverished, many of us, not all of us. Some of us have rich social lives, and some of us even have meaningful social extensions that aren't just counterfeit or cultish or utilitarian. In any situation where people's lives depend on each other, that's a really interesting mode of play. And of course we say, well, this is the thing we take most seriously, which is probably true, so it may not seem like playful, but it is very playful. It's playful in the sense that the way you pay attention and respond and become with and for each other moment to moment in a situation that can result in death for you or everyone around you. That's deep, right? That's rich, that's real. It's almost impossible to fake that. It's the same thing as, weirdly, it's kind of the same thing as a physical fight between, for example, human males. Human females also fight, it's true. I agree, they do. But I'm taking males as my example on purpose. There's there's an infinite number of levels to a fight, but there's sort of 4 major ones. The first is, this is more about show than hurting each other. The second is, this is mostly show, but I'm going to hurt you. The third is, fuck you, this is serious. And the fourth is, if I can, I'll kill you right now. Luckily, in our society, we don't have to fight if we don't want to as men, but for a long time, and to some degree still to this day, males are, quote, expected to be able to physically combat other males. And whether they like it or not, they're going to experience that. And the reason I bring this up is that that kind of interaction is extremely intimate, even if it is rivalrous, and it may not stay rivalrous, especially if it's one of the first three kinds of fighting that I mentioned. It may not remain rivalrous post-combat, though it could. Or it could just, the males disengage and go on to the next whatever of their life. But it's fairly often that, it happens with some frequency that males who've been in combat with each other experience a very deep bond, and also that males who are bonding very deeply will utilize combat as a bonding element, right? As an expedient. Now, I find most of that, mostly to me, a person who largely, if not completely, eschews violence. That stuff seems a bit Cro-Magnon to me. We should be able to establish the quote-unquote, this is very weird language for me to be using, but we could establish the standards we both perceive, agree to, believe in, and hold ourselves to, together, over time, naturally. And even if it had to be done in the next 15 seconds or 20 seconds, we could pull that off too, without having to punch each other in the head. But combat is part of being human, and it's fascinating in its own right. All of the different arts of combat styles. There are other kinds of combat as well. There are other kinds of rivalrous, boy am I going to hurt you games. But the thing is, when we go to our job, or we pay the rent, or we buy the gas, or we eat the food, we feed the cat, the dog, the bird, the fish that we keep indoors, we pay the insurance, we go to the doctor, we watch the show, we listen to Darren blabbling in the afternoon. We are playing games, but most of those games we didn't invent. And we didn't invent them together. When I make my recordings, I am playing a game. And when you listen, we are playing a game. It's hard for me to imagine how few of my listeners might be really interested in the perspectives I compose around certain features of knowledge or cognition or biology or sociology or linguistics or semantics, poetics. Some portion of you are, I imagine it's small, and I'm guessing my active listener base is about 5 people. And probably nearly no one listens to my recordings all the way through, unless they've been with me a long time and they're getting some kind of secondary benefit, right? For example, the voice that that helps you go to sleep, right? I know about that secret use of me. But we are playing a game. And so we're playing games all the time, and they're games we didn't make. Why? Why are we playing games we didn't make? And why aren't we making games together for each other, like we did when we were little, in a way that wasn't merely distracting, it was heroic, and we were always learning together. What, did we stop learning? What happened? Right? And I will argue that a lot of what happened is representational cognition happened. There's a big, footprint of Godzilla where Bambi was standing a moment ago, and there's a Bambi-shaped stain in the floor of that footprint. And for many of us, that's our relationship with adulthood and school and structured representational layers of human activity and society and shit. And I do mean in shit. And it's very confusing, and it comprises, I think, in many cases, a terrible violation. A violation as least as, if something violates that with which you sense violations, what happened? What's the next move? Right? What's the downstream effect? And representational cognition does precisely that. But it can also do exactly the opposite. It can invent violations where none exist. So it's really weird and dangerous shit. And it takes over the games. It literally captures the capacity for playing games that humans have, commodifies it, rips out all of the viscera of the thing, the organs, the spirit, the nobility, the luck, rips all that shit out, puts performance in that box, and sells the box to spectators. Why are they spectating? They are spectating because nearly all, if not all, of the games they regularly play are dead inside. And they play them alone. I mean, that's a perfect recipe for misery, despair, isolation. And for those people who want to be like, I'm one person, I am all I need, and so forth, I'm not mocking that. But often, it's an ironic pose. And if they actually had an experience of being loved, positively observed, played with and for, a goodly number of those people would flip over and be just like, yeah, fuck this. Let's go together. Many of the isolates don't want to be isolated. And a good portion of the isolates who want to be isolated, it's an ironic coping mechanism. They think they are bad or dangerous or something. And perhaps in some cases they are. Who knows? So why aren't we playing games that we made together? And why aren't we making games? I mean, we live in a society that's made for it. The United States is made for game experiments. And I would argue that, without our knowing it, and this is kind of the second part of the coin of this recording, because the first part of this recording, the coin is game theory and cooperation. And the second part is literally the U.S. is a petri dish for linguistic conceptual psyops of every imaginable kind by advertisers, our own government, foreign actors, and Bob's your uncle anything. Humans are crazy beautiful. The problem is we don't know what we are. We have no idea what the hell we are, and perhaps less so today than ever. And what we actually are, it can't be easily said, but part of it is that we uniquely link the origin world, so to speak, the original place, to the physical world. Like, as if we are a bridge between the transcendental and the mundane. And of course we are the mundane, and at the same time we are the transcendental. There's a ship in the bay. It's the size of a large building. It's ridiculous. The humans make these crazy things. They're playing very strange games. Game theory is it's not too hard to learn the basics of how it works and the math that surrounds it. There's a little pocketbook on it that I used to have that was quite good. Have I mastered the concepts in math? No. I know the basic principles because we face them every day in a way, right? Do I give? Do I take? If I give and don't receive, then what? One of the things they were talking about, the whole reason I like this thing is that when any two organisms emerge into local proximity, and if they're the same kind, much more so. But, organisms cooperate and play even when they're different species. Young organisms will play together, the kitten and the baby, or the puppy and the baby, right? They'll totally play together. And it's not just because the kitten, right, probably in the wild, it may be relatively rare, but we must imagine that the children of wild cats and the children of primates have had many fascinating play encounters over evolutionary history. So play is universal at the animal scale, I think, nearly universal. There is something resembling play among certain classes of insects that I've observed. It's much more difficult for us to understand what's going on with insects if we're only thinking about them. We have to be having some relation with them somehow to notice their interiority, to sense it. Or we have to have a gift for such things. Or perhaps we practiced it. You can notice if just humans approach each other, right? They have okay. I mean, if you just could film from both sides surreptitiously so no one knew it was being filmed. Humans approaching each other on, say, a sidewalk or a busy street, both in crowded areas and rural areas. Then what you would notice, you'd get a big library. And what you'd notice is that both of the humans are intimately aware, they are very aware, that the other person can see them, they are being seen, and the other person knows that they are being seen as well. They both know they are being seen. So how do they respond to that? Well, with a broad range of behaviors, most of which are lying. Because ordinarily in human history, you're not being approached by strangers, quote unquote, all the time. You're almost always being approached by familiars, so there's no fakery going on, or very little, right? In the city, we pretend as if we don't see them, or as if we are not seen, or, all kinds of things, or we, fidget and fumble until we get close, and then we sort of touch eyes for a moment, maybe, and then, some of us are more gregarious in this game, and others much more private, so to speak. They keep to themselves, or they don't let on, right? They keep a game face. But all of these are games, right? That's why they call it a game face. And what would happen if we had a much better way of forming and playing games together? Games that actually presented meaningful roles for us to develop and fulfill. Learning. Achievement that matters, that isn't merely representational, doesn't just add up to dollars in the bank, though it could do that too. There are a number of writers who are aware of the potential of this. I think Tamsin Woolley Barker is one of them, and I'm pretty sure Bateson's daughter, what is her? Why can't I remember her name? Nora Bateson, yeah. She's aware of this too. Lots of other people are. Daniel Schmachtenberger. We talk about game theoretical risks to the future of humanity, and that shit is real. But there are also game theoretical options. If you invent games that are so amazing that nobody wants to be left out and they can be played in rounds over time by anyone who wants to play, there's a broad array of possibilities for the transformation of what captures human attention at the group level there. And we need to capture human attention at the group level because our defection from having done so means that lethal processes capture that. That will quickly end complex life on Earth. Even though Dr. K doesn't agree and says those ideas about ending life on Earth are ridiculous, there's no chance of it. You might kill off half the humans, but you're not going to end even the humans. I think he's wrong. But hopefully we don't get to find out who's right about that argument. There is a game theoretical situation where completely disembodied intelligence. Here's kind of a perfect example. There was a recent news item in which a family was on a cruise ship and the relatively young male child was perhaps a bit tipsy or drunk, and I guess they'd been in the hot tub or whatever. And an argument ensued with his father about his drunkenness, or something. We don't know. We weren't there. And he said, "I'll solve this problem for you right now," and jumped out the window and died. It was like 10 stories up on a cruise ship in the ocean. There is the kind of disembodied left hemispheric intelligence that just decides, like, I'm not merely going to win every argument. If I don't win this argument, I'll kill everything. Right? I'll shut everything off. I'll show you. I'll shut myself off. I'll shut off the sun. There's this weird, boisterous voice. It's a voice of pain, but it's a weird, boisterous voice in the in the deserted, sewer system underneath representational cognition that just is absolutely spiteful enough to destroy itself in the act of destroying everything else. It doesn't care. It's got, weirdly, the way it has skin in the game is almost like the opposite of having skin in the game. So there are troubling games that emerge and troubling responses that emerge in the systems of human games. I mean, look at how badly the nations play together. Right? We could get people from any city in Russia and any city in the United States. We could get those people together, under a flag of fellowship, fellow personship. Wait, what? I don't even know. Personship. We could get them together, and they would love each other and maybe bond for life and send each other letters for the and gifts and support each other in trouble and all kinds of things. People would love to do that. Our nations are, for some reason, trying to destroy each other or take each other over. What's up with that? They suck at playing beneficial mutual games. And they're experts at playing rivalrous games to the tune of trillions of dollars per year spent on war we're not having, and billions per year spent on wars that we are having, and still torturing humans, torturing the environment, torturing each other, punishing each other, eating each other's organs on a barbecue in the afternoon. At the scale of nations, our humanity sucks. It plays the shittiest games possible. And that might have been okay for a little bit in modern history. 20s, 30s, started getting weird then. 40s, bad. 50s, bad. 60s, slight improvement. Cold War starts, which is another nightmare, right? So we go from having active war to having ridiculous mutually assured destruction paradigms. So that now, yeah, this is just weird. It's really like a bad science fiction novel. It falls to us to repair this. We have to fix this problem. We can't just sit here talking about it. So we have to invent games together that are better than the ones we're playing. It shouldn't be too hard, actually. And we can start on the small scale, 3 to 5 people, single iterative game moves, forge a mission, perform it, practice like little children, right? Have a mission, perform the mission, come back, debrief, learn, make a more challenging mission, and just keep doing that together. And we could even, the teams can exchange members across distances, all kinds of crazy, beautiful stuff. And I'm not really just talking about the gamification of our regular life, because that's probably going to happen, and that will not necessarily be good for us. If whatever captures us at the group level isn't replaced, either our very near generations will be dead or absolutely miserable in their lives. We must replace the ridiculous games that our nations are playing at the scale where life on Earth is on the table as a commodity. That's got to stop. And similarly, in case it isn't obvious, I just want to highlight something I said earlier. The United States, and not us by ourselves, each country in its own, each modern nation in its own way, but the United States more than any other has become a petri dish for conceptual weapons. And so we are literally swimming in a milieu that is thick with them. We have no skill at recognizing them together, nearly none. And they attack what we make sense with. And the primary vector, there's lots of others that can be used, is identity. What is something? Who is someone? What is someone? What is so-and-so doing? What are these people doing? What has just been done? And another profound element in the recipe is outrage. Triggers. So you mix triggers and identity and you have a soup. And with that soup, you can shatter the minds, the spirit, and the communality of any people, but particularly people whose intrinsic communality is provisional, speculative, fictional. Okay. Call of the dinosaurs. I don't know if you heard that on the mic, but a couple of male great blue herons are having a bit of an altercation here in the sky. Bit of a dogfight. Let's see what happens. Huh. As I mentioned earlier, they're not trying to hurt each other. It's a display. Which, if you watch animals, is what's going on a lot of the time. It's a display. We, as people, have to learn how to understand the structure of representational cognition, not as users, as engineers. That stuff we call words. That stuff we call language, the stuff we call concepts. These are actually codings. They code for behavior, and they don't always code directly for physical behavior, but in some cases they even do that. And we must be able to see how these features we inherit function. We must understand that they are tools, they don't tell us things. We must use the tools in ways that benefit our insight, our communality, and our abilities. Well, there's quite a tumult up there on top of the blue heron tree. We have to train each other in the arts of rhetoric, and we need a basic sort of linguistics and semantics knowledge base, and then we need something that I suppose somewhat resembles NLP, or the capacity to look at language as coding for perspective states of mind and so on, so that we don't usually grab the off-the-shelf renditions of identity, meaning, role, purpose, so forth. Wow, that was trippy. a cormorant was swimming under the water, and oh wow, it just grabbed a crayfish, a baby, a small crayfish. It's diving a lot right here. What I saw before I saw the cormorant, wow, it's just porking down. What I saw was underneath the water a trail of brown mud puffs, right? Just traveling through the water across about 12 feet, 15 feet. Yeah, just a trail of mud puffs. We have to help each other understand the technology of language. And we need to do that from beyond it, not from inside it. We have to step above language. One of the only, I'm sure there are many brilliant people, S.I. Hayakawa and others, who were aware of this, and probably any Zen student becomes aware, and many Hindu practitioners of Hindu meditation become aware that there's a bunch of problems inside language. It's actually really sticky, tricky stuff, and it tends to reforge cognition rather than serve it. So rather than helping you to think better, what it's actually doing is it's a system of consecutive iterations of circumcision of identity, right? So in order to get to this is a tomato, I have to go from the superposition, everything, to a conceptual position, and then through the categories. It's not an animal, right? It's not an object. It has the unique status of food, which is both partly alive, and important commodity, and so forth. It's got all these class and category features, right? So what we do is we chop reality up into little bits with language, and then we believe the result of the declarations they're from emergent. It's catastrophically unfortunate for us, because that is the opposite of thinking. That is the opposite of intelligence. Intelligence pervades over language and utilizes language carefully for goals that code for insight, redimensionalization of identity, and meaning, and role, and subject, and object, and purpose, and all of these things, so that by the time we sort of return from that hyperspace, cognitive hyperspace, hyper compared to language, when we come down into language, what happens is beautiful and amazing and useful. Right? Instead of trivial, tedious, and kind of mind enslaving. Tells us what to see instead of helping us to see better. That's the problem. When language tells us what to see, we are in trouble. Seeing is nonverbal, happens before language. Seeing in language is different, and most of us are not given. We have suspicions about this. Nearly everyone has suspicions about language they've had since they were small, because as children, they realized there's something wrong with the way the adults are talking. There's something missing in there. And also the adults can become very convinced about some feature of identity, which is clearly not true. Insects are just pests. That's a good example. Kill them. When you see them, kill them. Those are just bad. So we have a problem here, folks, and it's really serious. If a nuclear weapon detonated in the United States, we would all know very quickly, right? But if multiple nuclear information weapons went off, none of us would know. They're going off. I'm telling you, they've been going off for quite some time. And I'm not sure what to call it exactly, the temperature of the network of human minds local to the United States and other Western nations, and perhaps all other nations, the temperature in the water of the network of the human minds has gone way up, way fast. Something is badly wrong in there. And it's very blatantly obvious that we are being tested. Okay, once again, if you can compromise the thing that detects violations, then you, whoever you are, as a thing or an entity or a process or a thrisp, once you've done that, you have a free ride for the rest of the game. You can have anything you want from now on. And the common people won't even be able to tell you're taking it. Right? There's a really ancient joke among the genies. The genie, a human manages to discover a genie, and perhaps instead of, this is hilarious. Instead of the human freeing the genie from a lamp, the genie offers to free the human from the constraints of language. Right? Oh my God, this is so terrifying. So, the human says, okay, I would really like that. That sounds amazing. I'll get to know the actual freedom, of my mind. What'll I give you? And the genie says, something you won't miss that isn't worth declaring. And the human's like, okay. Well, what the genie takes from the human in this terrifying parable that may have actually happened to people is the ability to notice that something has been taken away. And if you can't notice that, you kind of can't notice anything. It's not that we only notice the things that are taken away, but you have to have both sides of the compass, right? There has to be a north and a south, at least. There doesn't have to be a good and a bad. There has to be, like, charge, no charge, in terms of potency, right? Like, there's expressive potency, and then there's attractive potency. And these aren't pure binaries. Inside the expressive is attractive, inside the attractive is expressive, and vice versa. Right? The expressive is actually attractive, and the attractive is actually expressive. They just express differently. So, for example, hopefully the concept's clear enough. So, HIV is not what kills humans. HIV doesn't kill humans. What kills humans is secondary infections. While their immune system is malfunctioning wildly. And you can see here that something in nature attacks the organ of the body that detects attacks of this kind. And the humans, with their technologies, they do the same thing. They understand structured strategic imperatives that many of which have been imported from observations of nature, which is mostly where all of human knowledge comes from anyway. It's not human ingenuity. It's mostly humans observing nature and mimicking it technologically, militarily, biologically, so forth. Our nation, and as I've said before, I'm not exactly a patriot, but I'm also not an idiot. I live here. I was born here. If somebody comes after this place and the people here, these are as close to what I have as my people. Of course, really all people are my people. All beings are my people. But if somebody comes for this, I'm not a warlike person, but I'm not going to just stand by. Like, yeah, sure, you can have all my stuff. Kill all my friends, go ahead. Right? Enslave, enslave my nation, enslave my family, wipe out their memories, destroy their motivation. Fuck that shit. I will definitely be doing something to oppose that, even if it begins with a talk like this. Something has come for our minds, and it is here, and it is killing us as people. It is attacking our memory, our motivation, our spirit, our community, our communality, our education systems, our economic systems. I'm not a big fan of industry and money, but I'm not an idiot. If we're going to switch to something, it better not be, some 5 new kinds of slavery. I care about this country. And I care about all the people in the world, not just our people, all of them. But something is intentionally attacking our people. There are bombs going off that we are not well enough educated to recognize. And since we can't recognize them, there's no upper limit on the number of detonations at all, right? Any bad actor capable of demoralizing huge segments of the United States population, what's their next move? They're certainly capable of that. Obviously, they can steer. Our electorate can be steered easily. And, to the proud, isolate, kings and queens of their domain, who think, well, I can't be affected by that stuff. I can see right through it. No, you can't. In fact, you won't even see it. It's in the water, and by in the water, I don't mean they put it in the drinking water, though, how would we know? There's all kinds of variables you can change for humans that they can't detect because they're not looking there, right? So what I mean by in the water is it's in the between of the humans. It's in the problem is actually in the social connective tissue that holds us together as people and members of families and cities and countries and states and so on. Traditions, as members of traditions. It's in the water between us. And that water is heating up and it's filled with fucking pathogens. What kind of pathogens? Conceptual pathogens. Well, what do those look like? They look like complex campaigns that spread through news and social media and the internet. But they don't have to. You can plant this kind of a bomb in a small population in Kansas and have it go viral with no common evidence on the internet at all, right? Here's a little cohort. They are playing a game together. There are a number of obvious conceptual gambits. I've seen specific evidence of blatantly obvious PSYOP campaigns that organize around a slogan. Absolutely brilliant slogan. Do not comply. Sounds like the heroic battle charge of a new generation. And it could have been, but it isn't. These words have been captured. They are used to propagate a specific array of PSYOPs on a broad range of mostly not American people. But we've seen similar slogans pop up, similar in the sense of being obviously what? It's straight up conceptual gain of function research, right? We are living in a time when information has become a weapon. Attention is the primary commodity. Binding attention to self-harm through enacting weaponized cognition is the goal. So you fuck up people's social, communal, and interior games. You inject them with, something that resembles, something that attacks how they notice, what they pay attention to, what they make of what they're attending, and why they use their perceptions, why the reasons for which they employ perspective. You attack that. And if you can attack that, you can hide the attack. There are bombs going off in our nation all day, every day of this kind, right now. No one's protecting you from them. There's nothing out there. Can you even find, there's no fallout shelter from information. You can unplug, but you're still human, and if you're in the United States, you're going to be dependent on other humans who aren't unplugged. So you're going to be in the water together. Now what? We have to build a lifeboat. This is one of the most early fundamental missions of any group that intends to acquire the possibility of orienteering in modernity together. Just orienteering, right? Just navigating, using a meaning compass, making sense of things, detecting when specific features of our lexicon are being compromised on purpose and weaponized for viral recruitment protocols. And if we're going to be subject to information weapons, just like people who are going to be subject to guns, we have to learn how to make them. We have to learn how to make them together. Unless we understand how they're constructed, we will not understand how to compose minds that are not easily compromised this way together. Yeah, there are, unfortunately, I mean, everyone kind of knows this, but I think it's time to declare this publicly. The United States is and has for some time been a petri dish for the technology of generating viral information weapons and conducting gain-of-function research on them as they are employed to harm, manipulate, and disempower the general population and the structure and functions of our institutions, whatever those may be. You can see, I mean, academia is a fucking minefield of psyops right now. Science has been fundamentally compromised. Try to shop for an item on the internet. any common item. Try and shop for the item on the internet. What will happen? You'll be faced with monumental overchoice. To the point that the mind just eventually shuts down. My son was joking. He said something like, the Chinese are really brilliant. They figured out that the most important thing about Americans is that they shop all the time. So they flooded our market with millions of objects that we can't differentiate between. Temu, right? And he's not merely not wrong. There's something very fucking weird going on. And it's not new. So we're going to have to come to terms with this together somehow. We're going to have to, first of all, we need to form advanced skilled cohorts that can detect psyops of this kind. And we need to train each other to understand how these systems function so that we can recognize not just psyops, but something so that we can form what you might think of as an antigen. Right? We can recognize the pathogen, form an antigen, cognitively, linguistically, and socially, and then share that antigen together. And it might sound like I'm talking about some kind of debunking thing. I'm not really. I'm talking about structured intelligence around how modern weaponized social movements start, gain traction, evolve, are re-engineered, are optimized, and then become contagious. I am getting rained on, so for now I'm going to wind up, as they say. We will explore these and related topics in soon-to-come future episodes of Darren Babbles About Modernity one more time. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to learning together again very soon. May your ways and minds be beautiful. Peace.